Hello and welcome to Tonight at 8 from the RSGB. The World Radio Sport Team Championship, or WRTC, is usually held every 4 years and it's an exciting event which brings together 100 ham radio contest operators from all over the world to a hosting country and who compete for the WRTC crown. The next championship is in July 2026, and what makes it very special for us is that the host country is going to be Great Britain. But there's lots to do before the main event, and to tell us all about it and also explain how amateurs can get involved is the UK Organising Committee, who are all with us tonight. Now, if you're watching this on Monday 15th of January, then this is live, and you can ask questions and make comments on either YouTube chat or BATC messaging at any time during the presentation or straight afterwards. Please include your first name and call sign if you have one within every message. And note that you can make this video stream fill your screen on most devices, usually by double-clicking on the picture or pressing the full screen button. So now let's meet the team, and first up is the chairman of WRTC 26 Organising Team, Mark M0DXR. Welcome to Tonight at 8, Mark.
Good evening, David. Thank you very much indeed. It's an absolute pleasure to be here talking about this exciting project. And the whole team here, the WRTC Organising Committee, are all online tonight. And we're very excited to be presenting to the RSGB members and also other amateurs around the world. As you've rightly pointed out there, David, the WRTC is the World Radio Sport Team Championship. And what we'll do is we've got a slide deck that we'll run through, where we'll introduce you to the team and also explain a little bit about what WRTC is all about, and give you an insight to our planning, our preparations, the hard work that's going on to organise this event for July 2026. So to get started, let's just take a look at what traditional contesting offers, and perhaps some would argue some of its limitations. With traditional contesting, there is a wide variety of setups, antenna types, output power, geographic restrictions and benefits that we're faced with. So, for instance, we can have a station that is located on a hilltop that would have a benefit with large stacked arrays potentially. They're going to be a lot louder, of course, than a station hidden down in a valley with hills nearby. And a station with a much smaller antenna is going to be at obviously a disadvantage. So we also have the variable, which is rarer stations are generally in rare countries and they attract more attention. So operatorability, of course, is extremely important in everyday contesting. So what if we could try and level the playing field on those factors and bring contesters together to compete on a level playing field? So if they were all in the same geographic region on relatively flat ground, if all operators had identical antenna systems to make it a much fairer competition, and if all operators were to use the same output power, limited at 100 watts only. And to add to the excitement, what about if we actually had referees looking over their shoulders to make sure that everyone's playing fairly and abiding by the rules? Well, that's where WRTC comes in. This is what we call the Olympics of amateur radio contesting. So it's an Olympic style event which is held generally every 4 years, and it consists of usually between 50 and 65 operators per team who get together in the same area, and it's all about operator skill and strategy, which will give you the leading edge to determine who the winning team actually are. There are some sort of high-level goals of WRTC. It's all about publicising radio sport inside and outside amateur radio, so building a foundation to ensure the success of the future of contesting, but also trying to draw in some of that fresh blood to what we enjoy. To facilitate you to bring like-minded and people together to enjoy this wonderful hobby. To promote advancement of radio sport technology, such as operating technique, real-time scoring, which has become quite a big thing in recent years, spectator viewing education, log checking and reporting, operator ranking and comparison, and as I mentioned, it's looking to encourage the growth of radio sport inside and outside the hobby. And we've seen some very encouraging numbers of contesting involvement from countries all around the world in recent years, and it certainly is something that many tens of thousands of people enjoy, and WRTC sets to grow that further. And in order to ensure a good future, we obviously want to bring in as many young people as possible, and to focus on regions with populations that are underrepresented in radio sport. So they're the key goals of WRTC. There is a sanctioning committee, so much like the Olympic Games, there is a sanctioning committee that look at running the WRTC program, and that sanctioning committee have a vision, a 20-year vision, to bring WRTC to be a premier international radio sport event and competition between teams attracting participants, spectators, and mainstream sport media. So this is the focus of this, and the aim of this is really to bring radio sport and promote it as a sport. You know, as we see, and there are we see in recent years how popular gaming is, for instance, and there's very similar sort of skills associated with serious radio contesting. So there's definitely an avenue there to explore. And development of radio sport standards for operating, adjudication, and technology. So there are that we've seen. I mean, contesting over the past couple of decades has really changed quite significantly, and we're pushing the boundaries continuously and using tools that we never dreamed that we would be using quite some time ago. So a little bit about the history of WRTC. It's come a long way. It started in 1990, so what's that, 34 years ago now, so quite it has quite a legacy going all the way back. It started initially in Seattle, where this idea of generating a level playing field to bring in the top contestants to find out who really the best is. That all started back then. It then went to San Francisco, and then went out of North America, and in 2000 found its way across the pond into Slovenia. 2 years later, found its way to Finland, and then down to South America and Brazil. Russia 2010. These, I think Russia was probably the event which really started to focus more on that level playing field. Up to that point, it was it had its limitations. Still very successful events, but it was the Russia that really brought that level playing field to make it a reality. It then went to Boston in 2014 on the east coast of the US. Germany 2018. Italy was actually held last year in 2023, delayed 12 months due to the pandemic, and then we're delighted that the UK has been awarded the hosting rights for 2026. So this will be the 10th WRTC. So I'd just like to introduce the wonderful team that we have here. So also on the call tonight is Lee G0 Mike Tango November, who is our vice chairman and also heads up the rules. So Lee's been working very hard on looking at the data and coming up with a set of rules for 2026. Fred G4 Bravo Whiskey Papa is our director of finance, looking after all of the accounts and driving the team hard to get enough money in, because there's an awful lot of expenditure. Chris, G0 Delta Whiskey Victor, is Director of Fundraising. So Chris is responsible for heading up our sponsorship campaigns to bring in that funding. Andy, G4 Papa India Quebec, is our Director of Sites and Stations, and Andy has a real big job on his hands to find a large number of sites for these stations in the UK, and he will also be defining quite a comprehensive shopping list of hardware that we need to acquire. Steve, M1 Alpha Charlie Bravo, is heading up our volunteers. We need an awful lot of volunteers to pull off this project, and Steve has the connections and the drive to help us do that. Georgina, M6 Yankee Golf Lima, is heading up the hospitality, all the work that's needed to find a headquarters venue and accommodation for this event, which is almost a week long in its full in its total duration. So a very big job there to organise this event for so many people for a week. We have an IT team, Tim GW4VXC, Peter 2M0SQL, who does an amazing job on our website and has worked very hard to regularly keep that updated. Michael G7VJR is working with us and is going to get more involved in this project as we move closer to the event on an IT solution that connects these stations with the headquarters and helps with downloading of logs and providing suitable network coverage to the stations. We have an advisory committee that was established in September, consisting of, you can see the call signs there, Tim K3LR, Robert G3NSM, John K1AR, well known for his CQ chairman role, and Chris DL1MGB, who actually headed up Germany in 2018. Olaf G0CKV, Bob MD0CC, and Cam N3KS, who's now down at the TI7W Superstation in Costa Rica. So we have a really good collection of individuals there to offer us advice and help steer us on this path. The sanctioning committee, we have 3 key points of contact: Doug K1DG, Chris, who's also on our advisory committee, and Tina Sugar 50 Alpha. So they are our points of contact into the sanctioning committee, which we have to consult with on a regular basis. They have to approve the rules that we set out and various aspects along the way. So we've got an excellent, strong team. We obviously need a plan, and I've, with my project management experience in my professional capacity, have come up with a plan to get us there. And it's quite, I smile every time I look at this, because you've got this very small box down in Q3 2026, which is what we're aiming for. And it's almost looks well, it looks like nothing, doesn't it, compared to everything else that's going on above. But we had to mobilise as a team, which took place just over a year ago now that we formed the committee, and we had to put a bid into the sanctioning committee. So that bid was a big piece of work. Actually, we had a lot of toing and froing, and we had to really convince ourselves that this was something that we could pull off. And some of the big challenges that we were facing, obviously there's the finance aspect, but we actually need a large number of volunteers. And so we did some research and we reached out to the amateur community just to see what the interest was. And we got an amazing response, lots of people coming forward and offering their in principle support to the project. So that convinced us that actually this was something that had potential. And then you can see the other work package areas around sponsorship, the sites, the hardware. We need to do big promotion piece, and we'll be visiting the shows around the world, like Dayton, Friedrichshafen, as well as the domestic ones here, to generate interest and try and raise money. And then there's the big IT piece around the website, but also the stations that I mentioned, and the headquarters. We've assessed a number of headquarter venues. This is where everybody comes and meets in the UK, and we have various presentations on the rules. There are social aspects going on. We even do. We believe we'll be doing tours to local attractions. There's going to be a lot of people coming here. I mean, David mentioned 100 operators, and then in addition to that, we also have 50 referees, and we'll have spectators coming in from all over the world. So this is going to be some big party that's going to be going on here in July 26. Some of the aspects that have been key in sort of the recent past is that I mentioned that we've been working for over a year now, and that team had to be generated, and we had to. There was a lot of convincing that we had to do, that we were going to move forward with this. We actually registered as a community interest company. So we are a formal company with Companies House, and there are obvious obligations that come with that. We have also delivered a presentation at the closing ceremony of WRTC 2022, which was in Italy, and that was last July, and that's where it was formally announced, and the website went live, and also the social media channels. We're on Facebook, Twitter, all the usual ones. So we launched our sponsorship campaign, and we've actually had a really good response to that, and a number of clubs, corporate organisations, individuals have really stepped forward and offered their support to the project, which is wonderful. And we've already secured quite a lot of the hardware for the sites. So we have 50 antennas, we have 50 masts. We have all the coax for those 50 stations, 50 rotators. That is all coming from the 2023 event in Italy. So it's currently sitting in a facility in Italy, and will be shipped over here shortly. So that was our big initial cost. So we had to raise quite a lot of money to make a donation to the Italians to secure that. So we're really delighted, and that was realizing a big opportunity for us, in that we were able to effectively kill many birds with one stone there, and relieve some of the pressure. What I'd like to do now is hand over to Lee, G0MTN, who will talk us through some of the rules aspects, and also explain a little bit about how a potential participant can get involved.
Super, thanks, Mark, and good evening, everybody. Yep, very happy to be here. So, yep, I was heading up the responsibility for the rules of the event, which are a little way away. So we don't have those details finalised yet. But just to say that, yeah, we are listening to the community, we are listening to what people want, and also being very mindful of what's happened in the past. But to say the main activity that we've been involved with has then been sorting out the qualifying criteria. So in order to take part, or for the majority of entrants at WRTC, you need to qualify, and this, as I say, has been the process that has been evolving and maturing for the several recent few WRTC, and it's now a relatively mature process. So with that in mind, and that legacy and the responsibility, and just also thinking about that, we want to represent or be a Olympic Games type operation. We don't want to change things too much Olympic athletes don't suddenly have to compete or qualify in a completely different way for one games to the next. So in general, what has happened? For the major international contests with a mixture of both single sideband and CW events on HF. So the major international contests have formed a group of qualifying contests that have generally been held, say, over a couple of years period ahead of the WRTC. So as Mark mentioned, with the Italian event being postponed a year due to the pandemic, and the sanctioning committee wishing that the next event did still take place in 2026, we've had to constrain our qualifying process, and that's had an impact on the contests that we've picked and how many of them there are. So we need to strike a balance so that we don't have active contesters trying to do an event every weekend. It's not fair on them, as we realise that for many people, entering at the top tier is a very significant event in terms of time, energy, and maybe also money too, especially for those that are travelling. So overall, we've decided over perhaps an 18-month or less period, 15 individual contests, and say the best 8 qualifying scores would count towards a total, and then based in which particular area you are in the world, you're then aiming, say, to be in the top 1 or top 2, but depending on how many team leader positions there are. So these were the events that we'd picked immediately after, say, the announcement that the UK had been successful in the bid. That there were emails and suggestions and saying, well, please can you consider this contest? Please can you consider my country or my contest for the qualifying? And we've listened to everyone, and we've done the best to accommodate what we can. We thought for a UK event, maybe the IOTA contest would have been, say, an excellent qualifying contest. But because of the way that works with island and non-island stations, it wasn't really possible to put that forward. And as we go through, it's all those little unexpected consequences or small details that can really catch you out, which is why we've tried to be quite diligent with the rules as we go forward. Okay, next slide, please, Mark. So another very interesting point is, again, say, the number of, say, qualifying teams that will have available. So over time, say, this number has, say, been somewhere in the 40s, up, as I say, in the more recent WRTC to well over 60. And for our event, I think we had decided that we could, say, facilitate, say, a total number of 50 teams. So this was then thinking about the logistics and the resources and the volunteers that we would need for that, and also perhaps to say from a financial point of view, what we think that we could support, as we definitely didn't want to overcommit. So we have a certain number of qualifying teams, or say subtracting from the total. We know that youth teams, or for contesters aged 25 and under, has been an important and growing part of WRTC. So we're keen to have a good, say, youth contingent. We will be inviting the previous champions to attend as well. We have a wildcard position, and also that that we can nominate for when someone maybe has gone the extra mile and maybe, as I say, just missed out on a qualifying place, but we want to recognise their achievement and then invite them along. So for the rest, we've tried to have the majority of the teams qualifying and go through the process, as we believe that is the fairest way to get to WRTC. And so obviously, to say the youth teams and the wildcard teams, everyone that's picked will be going through the qualifying process. So in the exception to that will be, say, the donor or sponsored teams who will be making a financial consideration towards the running of the event, and they don't need to qualify outright. But as you can see that we've reduced the number of sponsored teams for WRTC 2026 because we feel that's the focus should be on going through the qualifying process and letting the best entrants be able to take part that way. Okay, thanks, Mark. Next slide. And so then once we have our number of qualifying teams overall, we then need to break that down geographically. So we have a regionalized qualifying process. As we know that, so propagation in one part of the world can be quite different from another part of the world, so that we want to so not have or reduce as much as possible any unfairness that may jump in. Although also we do want to say recognise the number of contesters in particular areas, and also the number of top contesters, looking at the scores. So there's lots of different variables to juggle. Sometimes it is a bit of apples and oranges, perhaps to say not difficult to compare fairly, but we can say that we've looked at the contest data, we've looked at past results, and we've tried to make it as fair as we can, and it literally has been, as I say, with the map in showing on screen there, a jigsaw puzzle of trying to work out, say, which countries should go together from a propagation point of view. Excuse me. So overall, we've broken it down to I think was it 42 or the 47 teams across the different areas. Yeah, we can move on from that one. Thanks, Mark. Okay, so as well, we also have the notion of referees, so also be involved in arranging the process for those referee applications. So typically, so the referees have been people that are, say, expert contesters. They're sort of very comfortable in staying awake for 24 hours, and also maybe good at single operator to radio operation, because they will need to be, say, monitoring the two audio streams from the two entrants in their operating tent. So the role of the referee, so they'll be making sure that all of the rules are followed, which is so generally taken, but it's just nice to have say a person there and a referee there officially, so we can ensure that everything has all gone on smoothly. And there are no maybe sort of accidental transgressions of the rules that we'll be setting for the event. So the referee application process, we've already had, say, a lot of interest in this, which is fantastic. But we'll start to draw up the criteria for that and start to accept applications. Yeah, we'll move forward with that one. Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. So I mentioned the youth aspect. WRTC 2026 is really focused on youth, and as Lee mentioned there, we have 4 dedicated youth teams that will take part. You can see here on the left, this was Philip DK6SP and UK's Jamie M0SDV, who actually took part in Italy, and that was their station. So just gives you an idea there, and Andy will come on to this a little bit more, talking around the hardware aspects. But there's an awful lot of hardware that will that is involved in this, and the teams are bringing a lot of the hardware themselves. So it's really quite significant. But and so there are lots of hams around the world that will step forward and assist the youth teams if they require it, and if we need to, we will obviously do that as well. Alan G4DJX is a local headmaster. I believe he heads up a number of schools in the St Albans area, and Alan has agreed to assist us with the program focused on education for youth. So we will likely have a number of trips, school trips that will come to WRTC and experience the thrill of the project. We'll do a presentation stream of some sort and some practical activities, try and get the youngsters on the air and get them excited about this competitive aspect, which really does does seem to attract. It seems to be an appeal for youngsters in the hobby. So it's a really good mechanism for us to bring in new people. So as I mentioned, Alan will help us with that program, and he's obviously got the knowledge and the connections to help make that happen. What I'd like to do now is ask Andy G4PIQ to talk to us about the site selection process and a bit about the hardware for the project.
Super. Good evening, everyone. Lovely to be here and having a chance to talk to you about this exciting project, as Mark says. Every time Mark talks about this subject, he says, and Andy's got the enormous job of finding 55 locations to make this all work, and it sends me slightly into shivers. But nevertheless, that's where we are, and got an exciting period ahead of us. So we need to locate this somewhere in the country, and Mark's spoken about the desirability of us having a pretty level playing field for the operators, and as such we've decided to locate this in East Anglia, specifically or mainly in Norfolk and Suffolk, potentially sort of outlying into Cambridgeshire and Essex, and that's really because of the terrain that's here. Most of you know East Anglia is pretty flat. I'm living on top of one of the big hills in Suffolk, and I'm at 60 meters, and it makes providing equitable locations much more straightforward. Next slide, please, Mark. So we've got this. I think one of the things that Mark mentioned was that Russia, the WRTC in Russia, was really the turning point for instigating this concept of a really level playing field with sites. And the map that's sitting here on the right is something that I took out of the guide that came from Russia. I was lucky enough to be there and compete that year, so it's got my scribbled notes of who was where. But this is one area. It's a set of fields about 20 kilometers or so south of Moscow, and they had 9 clusters of sites like this, where you basically got big open flat fields where every station has got really comparable takeoff. So you can see the little yellow dots, or the little yellow squares rather, on there with numbers in there. They were the site locations, and they, believe it or not, are at least 500 meters away from each other. So these are big fields, fields of 1.5, 2 kilometers sort of size. And we haven't got that sort of size of field in the UK, but I'm sure we can still make this this work. So let's say East Anglia, pretty broadly flat and clear terrain. We will be checking all the sites that we identify using terrain analysis software to make sure that the takeoff angles in the directions of key interest are within working limits of each other's. Also, noise is clearly a really important issue. Electrical noise crops up in some of the most unexpected places. I think we all know that in sites now, even in quite rural sites. We have noise from DSL, we have noise from electrical installations, we have noise from power lines, we have noise from LED light bulbs, and so on. So we do plan to survey the sites for noise and not just on an immediate basis, leave a monitoring receiver there and monitor that for a period and make sure that they are good and clean, because that's going to be very, very important. And I think historically, if you look at where sites have been rejected, right close to the contest, and I mean the day before the contest, when the teams have rocked up and put their stations there, it's generally been because there's an unexpected noise problem that's popped up. And I should say, you'll have noted that we've spoken about 55 sites and we've spoken about 50 teams, and that's to give us a contingency of about 5 sites to have as backup sites in case something should go wrong. We'd also intend to replicate what you see in that map of Russia, where the sites are located in clusters. And that's really about making best use of our volunteers, because having one group of volunteers per site would mean we need an enormously large number of volunteers. So where we can cluster those sites together and make more effective use of teams of volunteers, that'll be something that we'll try to do. and we'll absolutely try to stick at about 500 meters between sites. I was surprised. This was the first year that this was done with really such close spacing of stations. And before I went, I had my concerns about how well that would work. But it was amazing. You could operate there perfectly happily. Yes, the nearby stations were very loud, but with the sorts of qualities of radio that contesters are taking, there were no issues at all. And of course, technology has moved on substantially in the last 10 years. Blocking dynamic range and particularly phase noise and transmit composite noise has improved substantially over that period. And so the sorts of sites that we're going to be looking at are, appropriately sized, back gardens, orchard. I think farms will be a very important route. I intend to approach lots of local farmers and farming organisations to see if we can get onto their sites. We have a small challenge in that the event is the second weekend in July, and of course harvest is later than that, so we're unlikely to get onto any fields that are being used for barley and wheat. But there's plenty of arable around here as well, so hopefully that will work well. Also looking at the option of where we can get into public land, into town, country parks, recreation, conservation land, all of that stuff, and using what contacts we have as well with local clubs who have got field day sites and all those personal contacts to try and get a lead on location. So if you think you've got some good leads on that in this area, my ears are wide open. Next slide, please, Mark. So this is what a typical site looks like. In the middle of the photograph, you can see the obvious thing, the antenna, and that's about a 9 or 10 meter mast that's sitting there with a small tribander on top of it. The tribanders we're going to be using, as Mark said, are the same ones that we used in Italy. So they've got 2 active elements on 20 meters and on 15 meters, and 3 active elements on 10 meters, sort of standard, no trap, 7-element tribander. And then also on that mast, there's an inverted V dipole for 80 meters and an inverted V dipole for 40 meters, and the 3 feeders going into the tent. And so the operating tent is that tent you can see on the right-hand side there. You'll have a look inside those tents shortly. That's where the operators sit. And then just sitting in the foreground of the picture underneath the canopy is a small 2 kilowatt class generator providing power to the station. And then off to the left, the tent and the multicolored awning there, the site support people, their housing and their accommodation and so on. And that's a typical site. So next slide, please. So how have the insides of these stations evolved over the years? So I've been lucky enough to do 2002 in Finland and 2010 in Russia, and the concept of doing this outdoors in tents didn't arrive until 2010, which is the picture on the right-hand side. Prior to that, we were all in buildings, and this is actually Fred G4BWP and I operating from Marty Lane's boiler room in his basement, which was good entertainment. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see the first year of the tent-based stations, where the Russians really stepped up and took the level playing field to a new level. And this is Dave G4BUO and I operating there in a tent, looking pretty comfortable. It was actually about 35 degrees. It was absolutely roasting. And that's Gina UA9 MA, who was our referee. And I have to say, I have great respect for the referees. Gina is sitting there with headphones on, one radio in one ear, one radio in the other ear, and they have to sit and listen to that for 24 hours. And more importantly, put all the mental exertion that an SO2 operation like that takes without having the mental stimulation of actually doing the operating. And it's probably one of the toughest jobs in the whole part of the contest. So they did a great job. And then 2014, this is Mark, M0DXR, operating with Olaf G0CKV at their station in the USA, and you can see very similar layout. You can take a closer look here at what the station actually looks like. So 2 radios, and both K3s with pan adapters sitting there. A couple of monitors. There are clearly computers sitting there as well, and a shared antenna rotator in the middle. And then what you can't see is all the switching and gubbins that goes together to turn this into a real station. And actually, what you can see on the right hand side of this photograph here is one of the other team, K1LZ and YT6A's switching equipment, and you can switching and filtering equipment, and you can see in there there's essentially a diplexer there to share the tri-bander across 20, 15 and 10 meters. Remarkable things. I was absolutely amazed to be able to sit and operate with a single antenna, a single feed line, have one station on 20 meters, putting 100 watts into the tri-bander, and the second harmonic from that on 10 meters only being S9. Absolutely astonishing. And that's the sort of thing that this, filtering, diplexers, bandpass filters, switching in this thoroughly unwireless mess is important, where some of the innovation that the individual teams put in comes from. Next slide, please. So we're obviously going to need to make sure that these sites perform as expected. So in spite of all the theoretical work we're going to do, we will be setting up representative WRTC stations for testing during the IARU contest the previous year in July 2025 using the official antennas. And that serves 2 purposes. The first of which is to take, to see how well the sites perform, and we'll do that in a quantitative way by looking at the reports from the reverse beacon network to compare the signal strengths that are seen at remote locations from those antennas. Now, individual reports from the RBN can go up and down, but actually averaged over a period of time, it's a remarkably good, reliable source of data for telling how well sites are really working. And then the second purpose is to make the logs from that event available to the public, and importantly to prospective competitors, so they can look and understand what propagation looks like from the UK to build their band strategy, because actually, lots of them won't know what that looks like. And so out of this, any sites that are too loud or too weak, or sites that have got noise, will be dumped from the process. Next slide, please. Actually, I'm handing to Georgina. So, Georgina, over to you to talk about the HQ venue.
Thank you, Andy. It's an absolute pleasure to be talking to you all tonight about my role in WRTC. So I'm Director of Hospitality, and I'm looking into the HQ venue and also planning the weeks-long event. I've been working on the HQ venue throughout 2023, and it does need a lot of thought. I did view quite a few venues that I thought would be a contender, and then having thought deeply about what we're trying to achieve here with this venue, they weren't really good enough. So I started looking bigger and better, because the venue, we need to make sure that it's got conference facilities, good accommodation facilities, which is very, very difficult, actually, I've found, because we do need to house quite a lot of people for the contest and throughout the week. On top of our actual competitors, we've got visitors as well that's going to want to come and stay and come from different countries. We need to be able to support large ceremonies and parties and celebrations. We want to make sure that we can really celebrate this event, because we do think it's a fantastic event, everyone coming together throughout the world, so that's incredibly important. And also, with some previous WRTC events, not having enough capacity to have people there that actually want to be there. So really thinking about a venue that has a large enough space to hold a big enough ceremony and a large amount of people. We also needed to think about the reasonable access to operating sites, because we don't want to be travelling too far from the operating sites. So we want people to be able to get to the operating sites and back to the venue fairly quickly throughout that weekend. Transport links, so there's going to be a lot of people coming in from airports and the roads and the railway, so thinking about how they're actually going to get to that venue. And the IT infrastructure, what the venue holds, making sure that that is good enough for what we want. So as you can see there, that's a lot of demands on one venue, and it can be very, very complicated. So throughout 2023, I narrowed it down, and we've got to a venue where we have identified that can tick all those boxes, and a contract has been signed that we're going to be releasing to you all later this year, where the HQ venue will be. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the week-long event, so I've got the task now to start planning the week-long event. I have some ideas, but we do need to finer detail it. So we've got throughout that week running up to the contest, we'll have arrival of hundreds of visitors. We've got the opening ceremony we need to hold. We've got meetings for the competitors and referees. We'll have site visits and testing to fit in, allocation of sites, referees and call signs. Socialising, having fun is very important. And also we will have, I know Mark mentioned earlier, trips for people to go on as well throughout that time, to really make it into a great experience for everyone involved. Then we actually have the WRTC contest across the weekend, which is the highlights, and we will have live feeds and things like that, where we can where people in the actual HQ venue will be able to know what's going on in the contest, which will be really exciting. And then after the actual contest, we'll be very busy again, because we'll have log check-in and adjudication to go through, which we'll need to do fairly quickly. We'll have some more sightseeing as well, and tourism. We'll need to do the results presentation and the closing ceremony. And with the closing ceremony, as it goes on to the next point there, more socialising and having more fun, we want to make the closing ceremony a really nice big event to celebrate really successful WRTC, and invite everyone who hopefully can come as well. So I've got my work cut out for me. I think that I went for a period of time of not fully grasping the task, so I have to sort of keep each thing as it comes, rather than thinking about the whole thing, because otherwise it can get quite daunting. So we're definitely on target, if not in front of ourselves, with the HQ venue, which I'm very pleased and proud about. I'm proud to be part of this team, who are all fantastic. And I would like to hand over to Lee now to take you through the next slides.
Super, thanks, Georgina. Okay, yep. So me again, just with a quick update, just on our plans and aspirations for scoreboards and for media and multimedia. So as Mark mentioned earlier, this is a real-time contest scoreboards, so you can see how you're getting on, comparing you with your competitors. I've had, say, growing interest and sort of technical improvement in recent years. WRTC was maybe sort of pioneering that sort of well over 20 years ago, with referees sending in scores via text message initially, but that has now progressed. So our challenge will be, say, for all of the sites to be able to have our own sort of scoring network and make sure that's robust, and we'll be working for all of the time. So on top of that, as I say, we're aware that there's a large, say, worldwide community of people interested, and as well as just the scores, and maybe we can do some interesting things with the visualizations, or maybe even, say, going the extra mile and thinking of the WRTC goals, say, to make it akin to a regular sporting event, and also thinking of how esports have taken off, and maybe having a broadcast explaining the game, as it were, and analysing strategies or any races in real time. So we'll see how that pans out. Maybe with some video, photos, or audio, sort of delayed or anonymized as much as we can, so not to give anyone an advantage. But yeah, I think there's great possibilities there. Also, say for the whole week, WRTC, as Georgina mentioned. We hope that we'll have a media team able to stream news, events, interviews with all of the key players and show what's going on all around the HQ complex and with all of the ceremonies as well. And also, similarly to other WRTC, again, we hope that we can have a film team, say, separately recording events and showing what's going on behind the scenes and inside the tents for a documentary video. And we know those have always been, say, very well received in the past. So, we hope we can certainly deliver on these. Okay, and now over to Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Lee, and good evening, everybody. Fantastic to be working with this team that you've met during the call. And of course, the whole event is volunteer driven. Everything that you've seen so far is driven by volunteers. So all of the team here are volunteers, but of course, WRTC as a whole, we need an absolute army of volunteers. And those people really, they help with, you can see from the slide, that help with the visitors and transportation and the contest preparation. It takes an awful lot of work to get all of that, everything that you've seen so far, working on that 1 week that Mark showed at the end of the plan. So helping with visitors, transportation, contest preparation, but also at the sites. And Andy spoke about how they will be clustered. So for individual sites and clusters of sites, then we'll need managers and people to host at those sites, but people also to build and tear down the stations as well. So there's an awful lot of sort of manual and engineering work necessary, but we need people who understand, we also need people who understand the technicalities of, fault finding if something goes wrong, or when the station's actually set up that, there's a problem with the antenna or something like that. So we need a really wide range of skills necessary for, experience of contesting, but people who just actually want to be involved, because lots of people who help with club stations or club events, they'd be ideal to work with this as well as contesters. So a whole mix of people. But there needs to be a reason to get involved. And actually, my reason for volunteering here to be part of this team is because I wanted to find out more about WRTC and I wanted to be involved. So you get an opportunity, of course, to make friendships. And you've heard from some of the people on the team who have competed in previous WRTCs. Well, competing is one thing, but actually just being part of that event is another as well. And we can offer that. So making great friendships, special memories, if you like, and at a unique international event that's being held here in the UK. So I think it will stick with you if you, if you take part in it and you volunteer. I think there'll be definitely some memories built up, and we really want a fantastically successful WRTC. Now, as the plan has evolved, then we've been thinking that we cluster stations together, or different parts of the event, different things that we do. We've mentioned some of the media things, and the IT activity is quite considerable as well. Then all of those things are going to need volunteers. So to be honest, we are still forming working out exactly how many volunteers we need in which area. But the more we build the plan, the more we solidify the ideas of how many volunteers we need with what sort of skills. We've had a tremendous response so far. So a lot of people have contacted us, volunteered. Don't be concerned. We have you on the list. We absolutely do. And as we carry on shaping these plans, then we'll be telling you more and more about what's going on. And of course, this call today is one of those activities. We thought if we did this, we could let those people that have volunteered know what's going on, try and attract some more as well. And I've been watching the YouTube chat, and I've seen some of the people that have volunteered actually joining the call. So it's great to have you with us. And we look forward to a WRTC that we'll all remember and we'll be really proud of. So back to Mark.
Thank you, Steve. And we really do value the people stepping forward and volunteering to support the project. And we will involve you as much as we possibly can. We'd like to get as many volunteers along to the closing ceremony as we can to help share the experience. It's a wonderful opportunity to meet some really quite wonderful people that are very good at what they do in the field of radio sport, and to witness some of that operating and to build friendships, build relationships. It really is a wonderful opportunity for the UK. And I was just thinking that perhaps I should just say about the call signs, the referees and the sites, that these the call signs, which we don't know what they will be at the moment, but the call signs, the referee and the sites will all be drawn, and the operators have no idea what call sign they'll be using until about 5 or 10 minutes before the start of the contest. So there's and one of the referees' roles is to ensure that remains confidential, and nobody in the wider world knows which team is using which call sign. So and the site is also randomly selected as well. So the team have no idea where they're going until they draw that site envelope. So all these things are just great fun to be a part of and to witness. Okay, so obviously fundraising is a key part of this, and we have already started. If you go to our website, you'll see that we've already started populating corporate sponsors and radio clubs. We've also got a wonderful, amazing response of individual sponsors, and we're extremely grateful for that. There will be some sponsored teams, which is also an opportunity. It's a source of revenue for the project. There will be a minimum quantity of 2 sponsored teams, and we'll run those familiar with WRTC will be aware of the tent sponsorship programs that have been run previously. So we intend to do the same, and that will be announced in due course. We'll run raffles at radio shows and conventions. And we'll probably do some auctions, and then, of course, at the end of the project, there'll be all this hardware available. 55 lots of hardware of all the antenna kits, for instance, and we'll probably run a similar program to what the previous WRTCs have done, and offer that to volunteers at a greatly reduced rate. And also radio clubs that have chosen to get involved, and that will be, that is another opportunity. So if you're, thinking about getting involved, that may be something that would appeal to you. We're delighted actually to we're announcing this evening. We've not announced this before now, only really informally, but we now have a design for our supporter coin program, Bronze Coin, and this is available to anybody making a donation to support us for a minimum donation of £100 up to the end of 2024, and we will continue on with a silver coin in 2025, and then a gold coin in 2026. So there are three coins to collect, and as I say, this is the design that is hot off the press, and we've just given the green light to release it into production. So we're really excited about those coming in, and everybody that supported us up to this point will over the £100 level, £100 or over, will automatically qualify for one of these. So you'll be, if you have done, you'll be receiving one of these in due course. So that's obviously quite a lot of information there. So it's we're extremely proud and excited to be representing the UK and the wider WRTC program, and we're looking forward to the journey that we have remaining, and also, of course, the event itself. And we really hope that as many of you listening to this will try and get involved where you possibly can, and we'd love to have you as a part of the team. So thank you very much indeed for your attention, and I will hand back to David to address any questions which may have arrived.
Thank you very much, Mark, and everybody who's been involved with that presentation. I think we are all a lot wiser knowing what this is all about now. It sounds really exciting. If you have any questions or comments for the team and haven't already done so, please do it now on either YouTube chat or BATC messaging. And please don't forget to include your first name and your call sign in every message if you have one. So we do have a few questions for you to start with, and the first one that came in was from ADG6AD, who earlier also mentioned he hopes to be accepted as a volunteer. So it won't surprise you that his question was how many volunteers will be required for the event altogether. I think that's a question for Steve, probably.
I tried to. Well, I mentioned something about that as we went through. We've been thinking about that right from the start, but it's changed a few times. I honestly don't know a total number. But it's got to be hundreds, right? I don't know if Mark wants to add anything to that, but as we were changing, or thinking about how many stations we're going to be operating and how they're clustered together, that obviously makes quite a difference to it. And where the venue is going to be located makes a difference to the transport as well. And now we've got that more organised, then we can probably work round to an exact number, but I can't put a figure on it just at the moment. I don't know if anybody else in the team wants to comment on the complexity of trying to calculate that number.
Yeah, you're right, Steve. It is very difficult to do that. Once we have a better idea of the and since Andy likes me saying it so much, his responsibility to find 55 sites, we'll have a better idea on how we can make best use of the volunteer resources, and that all comes down to how many are on their own, how many can be clustered together. We will definitely need a good number of people to help with transportation to and from the sites, and it would probably make sense to, if that could be the same person as the site manager. So as we go through this project, we'll be releasing specific role titles and effectively job descriptions of those titles. One of those will be the site manager, who is responsible for a site. And I suppose it's possible that you could have a site manager responsible for maybe 2 or 3 sites, but we need to make sure that we don't spread the resources too thinly across the sites, because we need to be able to support the operators if they need it. And of course, there are other aspects like security. We need to consider all of that as well. So we can't be leaving, equipment. We need people to be staying there and guarding that equipment. So there's a lot of factors to consider. I suspect you're probably right, Steve. I think we're probably looking somewhere in the region of 200 to 300. It would be my gut feel on it.
So plenty of scope then, Mark, for people to volunteer. Well, you better put Andy G6AD down as one of your first volunteers then, because
on the list.
He's certainly keen.
Thanks, lady.
All right. Now we've got some other questions for. This is Steve M0DXR says, is there a reason you have one referee for 24 hours rather than tag teaming refs? So I suppose using several refs over that 24 hours. And I guess that's a good question for Andy.
So I think it's part of this. I think is about finding sufficient people who've got the skills to do this. So to make to be a successful referee, they really need to be experienced SO2R, single op 2 radio operators, so people who are used to sitting there with their brains split in two, one radio running in one ear, one radio running in the other ear, capable of copying CW at 40 words a minute in one ear, and listening to a sideband pile up running at 300 an hour in the other ear. And the people who can do that are relatively few and far between. So I think you've got an element of practicality there about just how many people can you get in to do that. I think if we had the luxury of having 100 or 150 people that could do that, we could perhaps go with more than one. But I think it's a practicality thing. I think really.
Okay. Anybody else like to add anything to that? Maybe Lee or.
I think when selecting the referees, I think we want to recognise that there are many people that have served before as referees, and so they do have experience. But also we will want to balance that with newcomers and give them an opportunity as well. About say splitting the role or having some hours on, some hours off for a referee to recuperate or share the load. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I guess it would come down to logistics as well. So I guess we'll just say that we'll take it away.
Good, thank you. I mean, we've had lots of comments and compliments. You'll be pleased to know. And still on volunteering, Ed DD5LP says volunteering for WRTC 2018 was one of my best decisions. And he says, I'm not a contester, but I learnt a lot and had a great time working with new friends, which is a lot of the things that you've brought out in your presentations, isn't it? Steve M0DXR says, thanks, very interesting organising this event and finding those 55 sites. Sounds like a real challenge, which I think it is. And several other people saying, thanks very much for a great presentation. Stuart G3RXQ says, re the HQ venue, what rough number of people, competitors, refs, visitors and partners and volunteers are expected to be accommodated at the HQ? Would you like to take Georgina, maybe?
Yeah, David, I'll take that question. Thank you. So at the HQ venue, for the closing ceremony, we're looking at around 500 people being able to attend, which is a huge amount of people to be able to cater for. The HQ venue also has a lot of bedrooms. I'm not going to actually give the exact number because I don't want to give too much away about our venue. But there's also a lot of like quite a few hotels nearby as well. So the venue is large and can facilitate a lot of people. So there's not going to be any worries about anyone who wanting to attend can attend really. Okay,
thanks, Georgina. Got another question now. I'm not sure who would like to take this. This is again from ADG6AD. Do the operators bring their own radios, and can they choose any make or model? So I could test. You've talked about already the antennas and the masts and the cabling, but what about the radio itself? Who chooses the radios?
I can take that one. So yes, absolutely. The operators basically bring everything other than the antennas and rotator setup. So yes, they bring their own radios. They're completely free to choose whatever they want to bring. You'll see all the top. Well, all the top brands will appear. Similarly, they'll bring their own computers. They'll choose different logging software. So some will use DXlog, some will use Wintest, some will use N1MM Plus, some will use WriteLog. So you'll see a complete selection, and it's always interesting to see what happens there. And some folks will bring small radios, and there will be some people bringing some of the very big and heavy, extremely large desktop radios as well from around the world. So it's quite interesting to see what people end up doing.
I guess so. I mean, how would you make that level playing field though? I mean, I guess it's fairly easy to maybe monitor the power, which I think is 100 watts limit. But what about other maybe unfair advantages that people might have by using a very sophisticated radio over someone else?
Absolutely. So the power we will monitor, and actually one of the things that we expect to have in place will be power monitors. So in previous years, we've had power monitors that sit between the radio and the antennas which will flash lights if anyone exceeds 100 watts on peaks. So that's monitored very carefully. The reality of and I'm sure many radio vendors would shoot me down, but the reality is that the performance difference between many of the high end and even some of the not so high end radios now is really quite small. And a lot of it's about familiarity as well. So it's what people are familiar with. There are some constraints we put on. So there'll be constraints like that. If the radio is a dual receiver radio, they can only use one of the one of the receivers in there. They're not allowed to have any automatic decoding logging of CW or anything, anything like that. Actually, on the logging software, there can be no, you can have no super check partial databases in there that give you lists of valid call signs and so on. So there's quite a lot of constraints that the rules put on you, but that choice of which radio you bring really has very little impact on the on the final score. A lot of it's down to operator familiarity.
Yeah, skill and things like that. Thank you very much for that, Andy. We haven't heard from Chris yet. So he's the Director of Sponsorship. Hello, Chris. Can you give us an idea how sponsorship is going? I know one of your colleagues said that you've had quite a lot of individual people offering and giving you sponsorship, but how's that all going?
Well, good evening, everyone. Yeah, sponsorship is obviously going to be a tough job. There's lots of people all across the world that we'll be trying to contact and take some money from them. But essentially, it's about investing in amateur radio into the future. So I suppose from a sponsor's perspective, it gives them a worldwide stage to get promotion across. Lots of companies advertise or promote themselves in their country of origin, but this is truly a worldwide event, and the exposure is a key thing for any sponsor. So we'll be looking at lots of different avenues, not necessarily all in the amateur radio or radio fraternity. So we'll be going out to all sorts of avenues.
Does that mean, Chris, that you'll be opening yourself up for maybe sponsorship of completely different, like drinks maybe, or something like that, and maybe even a bit of light advertising in some of the broadcasting or something? Is that the sort of possibility for anybody watching now who feels they might like to sponsor?
That's exactly right, yes. I mean, there's lots of companies that are in electronics based or sport related. The opportunities are there for a worldwide audience, and it doesn't stop at anything electronic or radio. So everything's on the cards, I think.
Okay, so if they're interested, get in touch.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Now, another question's come in. Probably this is for Georgina again. This is from Mike, G4IZZ, M4N. Will catering be provided, or are folks taking packed lunches, etc.? I don't know if that's for the HQ or maybe more likely for the stations, the 50-odd stations that will be out and about. Georgina?
Yeah, so I mean, at the actual venue, there'll be breakfast, lunch and dinner available, teas and coffees and light snacks and things like that. And we haven't got into detail yet about our contesters over the weekend, but it will be more like food being brought to them. So it may be more sandwiches in tent over the weekend, but we haven't got into finer detail. But there certainly will be catering provided or available.
Because it's worth remembering, isn't it, at this point? And I know most people watching now will have watched the whole thing, but we are going to have 50 teams, and they're from many different countries, so they'll have different food choices, food likes and things. And I'm sure a Great British sandwich is familiar to all of us, but may not always suit other people. So you've got to think about quite a lot of things with all those different peoples and different cultures.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to think about and plan. So when you saw Mark's long-term plan, you'll see that the HQ venue planning after selection it is going right through from now all the way to the event, really thinking in detail about these kind of things. And the thing I forgot to mention is obviously the bar in the venue will be open. I
think you've got a few more people interested now, even more than before. Lovely, thanks, Georgina. Ed DD5LP says, I presume no internet connectivity to the contest computer in the tent to avoid advantages, but with a link back to the HQ for real-time scoring over a private network, brackets, as was the case in Wittenberg. Who'd like to take that?
Well, I can take it, and that's an absolutely fair summary. So there's no cluster access, there's no ON4KST, there's no assistance. It's a thoroughly unassisted contest, even more unassisted than a traditional unassisted contest, if you like, in that you have no super check partial, so you have to just copy what you hear off the air. but there will be internet connectivity at the site for the purposes of sending the real-time score information back to the scoring board, and that's interesting. That's something that's changed substantially over the years. You probably didn't notice, but in the photograph of Fred and I taking part in 2002, there was a little Nokia phone on the desk, and this was this was a great innovation that the Finns brought to it, is using SMS technology to have the referee text the score to the central to HQ every hour. And we've moved from a position of sort of doing that manually to having computers connected to the LAN in the shack and automatically feeding the scores in real time to a scoreboard that folks can see all over the world. So, an example of true innovation and really trying to get this into the space of looking more like an esport.
Sounds fantastic. Stuart G3RXQ says, what is the structure for coordinating the volunteers? Probably one for Steve, I reckon.
Yeah, well, still a work in progress, it has to be said. At the moment, we're collecting offers of volunteering. If you go through the website, I think you can say what sort of category, whether you're IT skilled or station build or transport, things like that. But we will work out a way of coordinating those around the different activities. So I will probably be looking for some other people to help me with that coordination activity. So we'll probably be, if you think about the clustering activity that Andy talked about, then we'd have somebody responsible for the cluster, and then the team of people for building and tearing down within that cluster and supporting it, and so there's going to be a hierarchy in there, but we'll work that out as we populate the entire volunteer matrix, if you will.
Okay, Steve, thank you. ADE comes back and asks, would multiple different types of logging programs present a problem for live scores and networking? Maybe that's one back to you, Andy, again.
So in theory, yes, but the number of packages out there is relatively restricted. So I say the four common ones really are DXlog, WinTest, N1MM Plus, and a few folks still using WriteLog. And all of those have got integrations to the public, some public real-time scoring servers that you can take part in now. So those standard protocols for broadcasting information are all there. It's been developed in the past. So I think we will stipulate that people have to use one of those logging packages, or unless anything new comes to the horizon in the next couple of years. So there'll be a constrained set, but it's a pretty well contained environment that we're working in. So not an insurmountable problem there.
Lovely, thank you, Andy. I think that's got through most of our questions here. I just think before we go, it's good to remind, we've tempted everybody now with all of the ways that you can get involved. You can volunteer, sponsor, and things like that. To go back to Mark now, can you just tell people how best to get in touch with you, Mark?
Well, thanks, David. I mean, there's always the website, which offers all of the points of contact for the team that have presented tonight. So that is certainly the first port of call, and I'm sure that you can look all of us up on qrz.com. We're all on there, and I think most of us have got our email addresses. Look us up on Facebook, Twitter, X as it is now, and we're on a lot of social media platforms. So feel free to follow us there. But the website and the email address info@wrtc2026.org is the email address, and wrtc2026.org is the website. So if you feel like you would like to offer yourself to join the team, then please do so. We'd be delighted to have you on board.
Lovely, Mark. Lovely message to finish on, and we did put up the caption there with all of those web addresses and email addresses and things as well while you're doing it. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to all of you. That does conclude this webinar, and thanks once again to Mark, Lee, Andy, Fred, Steve, Georgina and Chris for their contributions this evening. I'm sure we all wish them luck with this very exciting project. As you probably know, the RSGB annual construction competition is now underway. The competition is open to all RSGB members and is judged online, so you don't need to send your projects away, and you have until March the 1st, 2024 to enter. For full details, visit rsgb.org/construction-competition or see the latest RADCOM. And in next month's Tonight at 8 webinar, we have a presentation about propagation at HF, what we can learn using digital modes like Whisper and FST4W. Well, if you'd like to see details of our future webinars or watch recordings of previous programs in the series, please visit rsgb.org/webinars, where you can also send us comments and feedback. And if you subscribe to the RSGB's YouTube channel, you'll also be notified of all upcoming Tonight at 8 webinars, as well as other new videos and presentations from the Society on a wide range of amateur radio topics. Until next time, this is David G7URP signing off and clear. Bye-bye.